Yo, 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 what it do, what it do? It's your boy Yellow the Poet, and I am here today with Miss, how do I pronounce it,
Yeah.
Jonelle Hoskins. And Jonelle Hoskins was a previous radio host, and she has immersed herself into over 20,000 worth of personal development and coaching. This is a wonderful opportunity to actually get to know more about Miss Jonelle. Let's learn her story. Everybody check her out. Thank you so much. We welcome you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So to get it started, please tell me, what was the journey like to making yourself get to a point where you can say, wow, I've immersed into a personal development coach and the opportunity to actually coach.
Wow. Thank you so much for having me. I love that question because it's gonna, take me back in time about 10 years now. I guess the journey for me started when I became a teenager and life changed. Things get a little bit harder as we're wanting to challenge our independence and we're wanting to make our own decisions and things like that in life. And I had quite a tough time throughout those teen years with, I guess, difference in what I wanted for myself versus what my parents wanted for me. And that led me to, I guess, on reflection, be a bit of a brat. I ran away from home for 6 months, and it was great in the sense that leaving home and being away from family meant that I had to do everything, right? I had to pay bills now. I had to learn how to put petrol in my car. I actually had to go for my driver's license. Before that, I didn't even have it. I was always able to rely on mum and dad kind of thing. And so I got independent really, really quickly. But it was this kind of entitled independence. And so when I came back home again, I was very much like, I've been out on my own for 6 months. I survived. I don't need anything from anyone anymore. And I kind of carried on that way for a few years. And then when I started working full time, my flatmate who I moved in with, we also worked together, and she was massively into personal development, and she had all the books, and she was quite into spirituality as well. And we used to sit outside having cups of tea. And I was never into cups of tea, right? And at nighttime, she'd be out there with a cigarette. She'd be out there with a cigarette and her cup of tea, and she'd be like, come sit with me. And, there's about 5 years difference. And we just started having these conversations that I just were so mind-opening to me, And it was really through that experience where we kind of I guess she kind of opened me up a little bit, and got beyond the surface of who I had been showing up as in my life, and really helped me to see that you can live another way, and you can live a better way, and you can actually use your life to be in service of other people. And so from there, I started reading personal development books. I started listening to podcasts, and then I started signing up to programs and things. So yeah, that was 10 years ago now. And I believe, like, my life motto is, if you're not learning, you're not living. And so I'm always looking at continuing my own growth, because at the same time, you can then use what you've learned to help other people. So that's really been the thing that started it for me, was being that bratty teenager who was quite entitled and like chip on my shoulder, had all the walls up around me, stay at arm's length, leave me alone. And then this one woman came into my life, which just kind of like cracked me open a little bit. To the point where I was then able to, heal that relationship with my parents, which is so beautiful, and heal my relationship with myself, and get to the point where now I'm in the most like loving, nurturing relationship, and I had the most amazing job. And it's just so, honestly, I can't speak highly enough about taking time to improve yourself and your own life, and how worth it is.
Yes, indeed. Self-preservation is definitely one of the best keys to not only knowing yourself, but it also opens your eyes to understanding the world around you.
Yeah.
Because when you know yourself, you understand yourself. There isn't anything
Hmm.
that anyone else can tell you about yourself that you don't know. And it's hilarious in some instances when someone trying to tell you something about yourself and you know you've done this whole thing with self-motivation, because you look at them and say, is that a matter of opinion, or is that just an expression that you just came up with? And I,
Absolutely.
because a lot of times my wife is always talking about self-preservation, and she
Mm.
is big on it. She is really, really big on it. She even does like exercises where you pick one side, you talk about how good the good about yourself, and the other side you talk about the negatives about yourself,
Mm.
but also opening yourself up to understanding that sometimes the positives that you see can also be negatives, and the negatives that you see can also be positives. So
Hmm.
if you do that project and really, really be truthful with yourself, you will learn so much more about yourself that you didn't even know at first.
That is so cool. And how amazing for you to be married to a woman like that, you know?
Yes, I love this woman with all my heart.
Aw.
She is definitely a wonderful woman and someone whom I definitely adore and admire, no doubt.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you so much. So, in your business of radio personality, how long did you do this, and what were some of your highs and lows in being a radio personality?
So when I was in my last year of high school, I was sitting in media studies class, and I always knew, you know, how you kind of like get this feeling or there's this calling inside of you. And you
Hmm.
don't necessarily know what it is at the time, but you know it's something, right? You're like, there is something inside of me. There is something I'm here to do. And throughout my childhood and teen years, I was, you know, trying to explore and trying to dabble with what that looks like. And one day I was sitting in media studies class at high school, and this woman comes into our class, and she was young, maybe like early 20s. And she told us how she was studying radio. And it was awesome because it was local, so it meant she didn't have to leave town. She didn't have to go to another, you know, city, state, university kind of thing, and it was really affordable as well. And she told us all the amazing stuff about this course. And me and one of my best friends at the time, we looked at each other and we were like, we're going to do radio. And we went home and told our parents, and this was at the point after I'd come back home after running away, and so this was me very like, I do what I want, you can't tell me no. And so I had the prospectus. I was like, I'm leaving. It was actually meant to only be my second to last year of school. I was still meant to have one full year left, but I went home and I said to my parents, I was like, I know what I want to do. I'm signing up now and I'm doing this next year. And it was only a 1 year course. So by the time I finish the course, I will be qualified in the industry I want to go into, and all of my peers will just be finishing high school.
Oh,
So
wow.
essentially, I'll be a year ahead of everyone else, right? Because I'll be straight in there. So I did that, and I got into radio when I was 18, which was just amazing. I did the course, I took all the advice, I networked, I went out of my comfort zone, I did work for free, you know, getting work experience, anything like that I could do. I was just on the hustle of like, this is what I want and this is what I've got to do. So by the time I was 18, I got my first full-time contract in radio, which moved me to a different city an hour away. And I realized pretty quickly, like, it's really hard work. It's pretty long hours. It's consistently 6 days a week. You know, when you start, you really do start from the bottom. I think radio is an industry where it's quite hard to just come in from day one and be the top dog. You know, everybody's story, they've got history.
Right.
I know stories of guys who wanted to be in radio so bad that they slept in their car in the car park
Oh, wow.
for like 6 months so that they could be there every single day to put their hand up for the crappy jobs, but to get noticed. And now those people, they're on the big time. You know, they're on the big dollars, they're on the big shows. So it really paid off for them. And so I had this mentality too of, okay, cool, like I'll do whatever it takes. And that was between 18 and 20 years old. And within that time, I got a promotion and I moved to another city. Radio is also an industry where you tend to have to move for the roles. You know, as you're climbing the ladder, you might get sent to a city, you know, that's a 10-hour drive away, or, you know, I live in New Zealand. Okay, so New Zealand's so small, so for us 10 hours is a long time. And so I'd moved to the city, and at this point, this is where I realized, Jonelle, you want to be a radio presenter. So before that, I'd just been doing promotions and I'd been doing marketing stuff. And then when I got to Auckland, which is, I guess, in New Zealand terms, it's where the big time shows are in radio. And I got to see the celebrities, and I got to see the famous announcers, and I got to see them doing their thing every day. Yes. And that's where I realized this is what I want to do. Like I want to be on the microphone, and I want to share, and I want to educate, and I want to inspire people. So that was great, right? Like that was the living the dream part of it, I think, the real aspirational part. And then comes the struggle to actually get there. Mm-hmm. And what I did is I had a full-time role that I was doing kind of operationally within the business. And then outside of that, I was covering shifts of anybody who was sick. So sometimes that meant working, you know, 15-hour days. And for a really long time, I worked 7 days a week. But also, I was so young. I was 19, I was 20. So it was fine. It was doable, right? But then one day, I don't even know, I can't specifically remember what happened, but I was in the hallway or something with the big boss, like the big dog. And I just burst into tears. And I said to him, I was like, I hate this. This is so hard and I'm so exhausted. Like, I don't want to be doing this. I said, I just want to be on air. I don't want to have a full-time role and be doing all this extra cover stuff. I just want to be on air. And I guess I'd kind of proved myself over the past however long that I had been doing those long hours and had been doing 7 days a week. And he said to me, Jonelle, hold out. Okay, give it a few more weeks, literally weeks, actually. He said, a few more weeks, and I think I have something for you. And he came to me 3 weeks later and he said, I have an interview for you down in Palmerston North. So this was going from the city to a small town. Okay, so in a way you could be like, is this a step backwards? But actually, it was an opportunity to propel me forward. So they flew me down to the city. I had an 8-hour long interview. They grilled me with questions. They made me go out into town with a recorder and interview people. They just put me on the spot with all this stuff. I had to prepare an outline of a radio show. It was like a full-on day, right? But it was one of those things when you know what you want and it feels so right for you, you've just got to go for it. So I did it. I put my best face forward, and then I ended up getting the job.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so that then led me to be a full-time radio announcer. I moved cities to this small town. And, you know, in your question around highs and lows, I think the highs come when you get your dream, you know, when you get the call up to say, hey, you got the job, you know, and you've been working so long for it. And other highs that I had, I ended up staying in that role for close to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And it was beautiful. It was a 3-person show. There was me. I was the baby. I was only 21 years old at the time. There was a male who was in his late 30s. He was a dad, a husband and a dad. I think he had like a 6 and a 4-year-old. And then there was another guy who was in his late 50s. And so he had adult children. He was about to become a granddad, you know, and so it was great that I got to be in the studio with these guys and I got to learn so much off them. And the lows started to come when everything about my life became content. Every single thought in my mind was, how can I talk about this at work tomorrow? How can I leverage this?
Yes.
And that wasn't what I wanted, but that's what I had to do to keep my job. And so I remember the arguments I had with my family, the embarrassing things other people did that I thought was funny, or, you know, that I thought would be entertaining, that I went and shared. And obviously I never said names or things like that. But what happened is that became the lows, because as I was doing this personal development journey, they were overlapping, right? So I was reading these books, listening to these podcasts. I was this growth mindset. And then I had to go to work every day. And in my mind, talk about really low vibe stuff. You know, we talked about the Kardashians. We talked about that kind of entertainment, celebrity gossip stuff.
Yes.
And then I had to share these stories of things that just didn't feel real. They didn't feel authentic to me. And so it got to the point where I was living two different lives. I was living this aspirational personal development, like, you go girlfriend life. And then I was living this, you know, Kim Kardashian just split up with this husband today, you know, and it just didn't match. Yes. And it was so inauthentic. And so this feeling that I'd had back when I was 17 in high school, sitting down, feeling this calling, it wasn't there anymore. Wow. And I was like, whoa, I literally thought I would be in this career forever. I thought this was my whole life.
Yes.
And as early as 25 years old, I realized, actually, this isn't for me. And I left. So it was insane, because throughout this personal growth journey, I'd heard a mentor say that if you're somewhere where you're not meant to be, if you're staying in a job that you hate, you're clearly not meant to be there, right? You are stopping somebody else from being where they're meant to be, because you're taking up that space.
Yes.
And I thought of my job, and like, from the outside, it was a dream job, you know, a breakfast show in a small town that had a good audience, had a really engaged community. We did cool stuff in the community. It was an epic job. Okay. But it just didn't light me up, and it wasn't epic for me, you know? And so when I heard that, those mentors say that, I was like, Jonelle, you've got to go, you've got to leave. And so I gave myself till the end of that year to find an identity, really, you know, like your identity gets tied up in things.
Yes.
And my identity was, I'm Jonelle from the radio. And people would meet me and they would say, you're Jonelle from the radio. Like, that was literally my identity. Yeah. Okay. And so that was a whole journey. And that, I guess, is really what brought this personal development stuff like in line, is because I used that to help me to shed this identity of being the radio personality, and to just, I'm Jonelle, and I go wherever my curiosity leads me, and I do whatever I feel called and excited to do. And it's just, it feels so good knowing that you don't have this persona to live up to anymore. Yes. It's just you know?
Yeah. So do people still actually meet you and still call you as Jonelle from the radio?
So after I left, I stayed in that small town for a few more years. So there were times where I had interactions with people, and they would say, oh my gosh, I just clicked who you were. I literally walked into a fish and chip shop one night. This is so funny. I'd made a phone order at the fish and chip store. I walked in and the store was empty. There was me and there was one other guy who was sitting there waiting for his food. I went to the counter and I said, hi there, I'm just picking up an order for Jonelle, please. And then I get my order and I start walking out the shop. This man was blind. He could not see. And he said to me, you're Jonelle from the radio. I can hear it. He's like, I could hear it in your voice as soon as you spoke. And I'm like, all I said is I'm here for my order, you know, like, but that's the thing, I guess, you know, if you can't see, your hearing would be better. So he could just pick it up like that. But while I was in that city, yes, people did identify and know who I was. But now that I've moved back closer to home, and my partner and I bought a property. So no one here recognizes me as somebody who used to work on the radio, which is cool. It's almost like
Yes.
sometimes I forget that that's how I started. I started in radio. I started in media with this intense grind that from the outside looks amazing, but on the inside, I hated. I forget.
So now, how does it differ being a radio personality to going into podcasts? How does that differ for you?
Well, this is the funny thing, right? When I left radio, I told myself I would start a podcast. So that was back in the end of 2017 that I left radio. I told myself I'd start a podcast, but I think I still had some internal shifts that I needed to work through around that identity and giving myself permission that, hey, you don't work for this big corporate company anymore. You don't have someone else provide that microphone or that platform for you, but you can do that for yourself, and actually really giving myself permission to step into that. And it wasn't until the end of last year, so the end of 2021, that the thought just, it had been floating, but I'd never done anything with it. I just wasn't ready yet to go back behind a microphone. And near the end of last year, it started getting louder and louder. And I landed on the idea that I feel like I could talk about every single day of the week, right? And that is women's confidence. So all things around your own self-confidence. And when I landed on that idea, I was like, okay, cool. I think I've got it. And I did my first recording of my podcast January 1st, 2022. So it was a long time. That was 4 years of a break, right? From being behind a microphone. And podcasting is different in that it's not every day you're creating. Every element of your life isn't considered as content.
Exactly.
One segment of your life is content, right? And that one segment being anything that's around confidence and things like that. That's when I'm like, oh, cool, I could use this for the podcast.
Yes.
And I also think it's different because people have to specifically go out of their way to find you. They have to be searching keywords or things like that into the platforms. Whereas with radio, you just turn on a radio in your car and it finds you, kind of. So it is really different. And that I imagine it's a lot slower to grow than what it would be if you were just on a radio frequency. But it's so much better because you just I get to choose what I talk about. There were so many confinements within radio. You can't, in my view, I couldn't speak my truth. I couldn't really talk into my personal development and personal growth because it wasn't entertaining enough.
Okay. So you kind of have to embellish a bit versus just speaking blatantly how you feel, what you think.
Yeah. It wasn't so much embellishing. It was more just I guess talking about different parts, and that's what started to feel really inauthentic because the stuff I was talking about every day, it didn't mean anything to me. The stuff that meant something was this journey of personal evolution, and that doesn't make radio money at the moment. Maybe one day.
Yes. So I was looking at your page and it was talking about you on a mission to help people thrive in a relationship. What type of relationships were you talking about on your page?
Yeah, great question. All relationships. I've recently just been doing a free series for my local community here. And every week for 3 weeks, we've done different themed workshops. And the first workshop was around communication within your relationships. And that specifically spoke to there was elements of your romantic relationships, elements of your friendships, your families, and then your career relationships as well. We spend so much time at work, and quite often we can become disgruntled by conversations or situations that have or haven't happened within workspace, and we bring that home with us. So for me, helping people to thrive within their relationships, it really is that holistic view of all relationships. And I think the tools and the ways in which you can learn and grow, it's all transferable to different areas of your life, which is amazing, right? It means you can learn a handful of tools, and you can work out most relationships in your life, not necessarily every relationship, because it involves another person, and we can't control people, and people are complicated, and we're hard work, so you can't guarantee that every relationship will change. But Yeah, it's for the most part, we can improve them.
Yes, indeed. I think that that's very important how you worded that. I think that one of the things too is understanding relationships in general would also
Mm,
help you understand um, what it's like or what it means to actually have a counterpart. Um,
mhm,
Communication is definitely the key tool, because without communication, then how do we have any form of understanding? How do we have any form of a way to get this person to see my point of view?
mm,
So there's so many different things that communication opens, so many doors that it opens, so many avenues that it leads you down, so many
mm,
opportunities to embrace your companion, your friend, your child, your parent. There's so many different things
mm,
that communication opens up. And I think
mm,
that people in general would need to look into those things and understand those things before even getting into another type of relationship where two people need to work together. But they got to understand too that any relationship requires that communication, and in any relationship two people are going to have to work together. There's going to be some sacrifices, there's going to be some compromise, there's going to
mm,
be so many different things that are considered workarounds that builds this relationship up into that strong relationship that no one in the world
mm,
can ever break.
mm, mm, mm. I think that's so fascinating, right? Because there is this perception out there that a lot of us need to be on our own to figure out how to be the best in relationships and how to show up our best and stuff. And I hear that, I do, and I've definitely had phases in my life where I've been on that journey too. But the place that I'm in right now and what I'm seeing a lot of other people doing is realizing that we can grow within the relationships that we're in, and that we don't, if you're feeling this lost sense of self, you don't necessarily have to leave the relationship in order to work on it. Our biggest healing and our biggest transformations come when we are in the relationship, when we are doing the work. And because essentially up until that point, if you're single and you're trying to work out how, you're trying to work out ways you can communicate better in relationships for when you are in one, that's all just theory. The only way you can actually practice it is when you're right there in it. And I mean, the relationship I'm in right now, he is just a dream. I'm so grateful that I've done so much work up until this point, and that I've had average relationships up until this point, that I've stayed way too long with people that I shouldn't have been with in the first place up until this point,
Yeah.
because I was in those relationships, I was doing the work, I was learning. And now we've been together 2 years. Fingers crossed we'll get married one day. We talk about it, it's on the cards, that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes.
Like, that's the level of the commitment we have for each other. And we both are so committed to learning and to growing together
Yeah.
that, yeah, of course, we're human. You're going to have disagreements, you're going to not get along. But I always feel the day after, or on reflection, looking back at it, I'm like, I'm so glad that happened, because look how much we learned from that, and look
Yes.
how much we've been able to take and apply to our relationship, so that that's not going to happen moving forward. And
Exactly.
that is when you're in the work of working on yourself, and when you're in a relationship,
Yes.
that's the best time that you can actually bring it all together. And I know sometimes it's hard, right? Sometimes one person, you're in the personal development space, or somebody gifts you a book and this is your first introduction, or you hear a podcast, shares it with you, and you've never done any work on yourself before, and you hear this, or you think, oh, what is this crap? I guess, I've got 5 minutes, I'll give it a listen, kind of thing. And then something inside it piques your curiosity,
Mhm.
and you just think, oh, okay, well, this is kind of cool, I might keep listening, or I might keep reading. And sometimes what can happen when you go on your growth journey is that if you are in a relationship, that other person might not be in a place where they're ready to grow, or they also might be scared of your growth, because they have this say a subconscious view that when you grow and you evolve, you work on yourself, you might realize you're too good for them. You might want to leave them. You know, there's so
Yeah,
much fear that comes up in other people when we take time to work on ourselves.
that's true.
And I think just noticing that, right? Just noticing like, hey, I'm on my own personal growth journey. And if you're not in a place where you want to be on this walker, you know, this ship or boat too, that's fine. And we'll just keep loving each other and meeting each other wherever we're at for as long as it's working for us.
Yeah.
And I've had relationships where I've totally outgrown them. And I've tried to stay because I've told myself like, this is the one, you know, this is it. But the reality is it just wasn't a match.
No.
And in me leaving and me ending the relationship, it actually gave that person the permission they needed to go on their growth journey.
Yes.
And that's part of it too, right?
It is because a lot of times in order to grow, sometimes you have to lose things. And it's kind of harsh when you look at it from a life perspective, but sometimes when we lose things, it opens that door. It opens our
It does.
Say, hey, now it's time for me to do something different, or now it's time for me to understand more about different types of relationships so that I can understand where's my place, where do I go in a relationship, what do I do in order to gain that personal development. And one of the other things too is let's understand one of the key factors that goes along with communication is balance. Because without the balance, there is no relationship. You don't really have a place to say, well, I understand this, but I don't understand this. And you may have a strength, like take, for example, this is an analogy that I use when I'm talking to some of the guys about their machoism and being in a relationship. So one of the things that I talk to them about is you look at the guys and you look at strength. You look at the females and you look at weakness, but you don't understand that just because you think that you're so physically strong, it doesn't mean that you're stronger than her. This is a perception. This is an opinion about her. Now let's look at the reality. If something happens, let's take, for example, someone comes to your door, or you're going to an office or going for a job, and let's say you both are there at the same time, and the interviewer asks you something and you don't know the answer to it, but she does. It's seen as though she knows the answer to it. She knows how to answer the question. She's knowledgeable. She's abreast of everything that's going on with this particular topic, and you're not. Now, who's the strong one? And a lot of the guys say, wow, I didn't think of it that way. I say you also have to stop looking at strengths and weaknesses as an opportunity to say that one person is better than the other, because you're not. There's always an opportunity for one person to be more dominant in a situation versus the other. So if she knows more about a particular subject, or knows more about how to build something better than you do, that's her strength versus yours. Now who's the weak one? Stop always looking at a woman as a weak person, because she's not weak. She just had different strengths than you. And you have different strengths than her. You have different weaknesses than she does. And let's understand that a weakness is not necessarily mean that you're not strong. It just means that you're not knowledgeable of that particular thing. That's what that means.
Yeah. And also for me, relationships are a team, right? Like you should be a team, and teams, like we all have different strengths. We all have different abilities, and we need to work to those strengths and to those abilities. There's certain things within our relationship. We live on a 1 acre lifestyle block, and we are massively into growing our own vegetables and things like that. And it is so natural to my partner, so natural to him. But to me, like, I have to think on overdrive just to understand this whole stuff, right? Like I was born a city girl. my parents weeded gardens, you know, once every 6 months kind of thing. Like this whole stuff is so new to me. And my partner, he went away for the weekend, just gone. He's been working away. And he said to me, okay, we've got all these seedlings that we're trying to grow at the moment. We've probably got like 400 seedlings in different pots all around our lounge at the moment, trying to keep them warm so that they'll germinate. And he said to me, can you please just make sure that you water the plants every day? Okay. And I was like, cool, cool, cool. So my mind was focused on, this isn't my strength, but, you know, he's away. It's normally his strength, but I'm going to, you know, make sure these things survive.
Yes.
And so it was in my mind, Jonelle, you have to feed these seedlings, right? You've got to keep them alive. So the 3 days he was away, I fed the seedlings. I made sure they were all good. He got home last night. And this morning, while I was getting ready for this podcast, he comes out to me and he goes, so did you water the plants? And I was like, yeah, I watered them every day. And he goes, no, but did you water the other plants? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he meant, did I water our house plants?
Right.
I had been so focused on the seedlings because that was, you know, the specific question
right.
that I'd totally forgotten to water all of our other plants. And I just looked at him. And here's the thing, I just said no, right? Like, no, I didn't feed them. But then I explained, this is where that communication and relationship comes in. I said, honestly, I was so focused on making sure that every day I watered the other plants, the ones that, you know, the seedlings, that it didn't even cross my mind to water our tree that we have right here in my living room, our peace lily that we have over there. Like, it just didn't even compute.
Right.
And so that to me is, you know, that's a perfect example of that is my partner's strength, watering our plants. And it's not my strength, you know, but like, but we're a team. And he went away. And so I stepped up. But hey, now I know for next time, now you've got to water all the plants, okay?
Wow.
You're still alive, don't worry.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty that is definitely an opportunity right there to learn something from, no doubt. No doubt at all.
Totally. And also we're a team, right? So when I explained my thought process, he's like, that's cool. And he just went around and watered the plants. And I'm sat there and being like, cool, Jonelle, you've learned the lesson. Next time, feed everything. And it's done. It doesn't need to be a big issue, you know?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Believe it or not, out of 26 years, my wife and I have never had an argument, not once.
Wow.
And a lot of people look at us and she'll say, he won't argue with me. And I can't do anything except for laugh, because truly I won't argue with her. I just feel like whatever she gets upset or angry about, I feel like it's it's relatable when I'm listening to what she's saying, because even though she gets to that point where she's angry or upset, I'm more focused now on listening to what she's saying and the reason why she's saying it, versus taking it personal and saying to myself, oh, she's yelling at me, or she's doing this to me, or she's disrespecting me. No, I don't look at it that way. I just listen to what she's saying, and then I'm like, oops, okay, I made a mistake. Now, how am I going to fix this? You know, that's what helps us to move forward, versus turning it into a big old argument or
a blame game.
Yeah, exactly. Because if she's pointing out something, obviously there's something I did do or something I didn't do that I was supposed to do. So either way it go, if I'm paying attention to what's being said, just like in customer service, they would tell us, don't assume that the customer is yelling at you, assume that the customer is yelling at the problem. So, okay, so I look at it as, okay, she's upset about something, there's a problem. So let me figure out through her voice what the problem is. And she explains it very well, very clear. And then I'm like, darn, oh. And sometimes it'd be something that I just forgot to do, or something that I wasn't even paying attention to. So I just go ahead, fix the situation, and then she'll look at me and she'll start laughing. She said, "You know, I can't stand you, right?"
I think that's so cool, because you guys clearly communicate, and that's the thing, right? I don't personally think there's I think no one can be perfect, and if you're at the point in your life where you do get tempered, we've all got little traumas and things like that can make us react certain ways, and so sometimes an argument does happen. But I think if you can get to the point in yourself where you focus on the what you've just shared around the actual communicating and articulating and defining what the real problem is, and not putting the blame on the specific person, and expressing your expectations and things like that. It doesn't have to get to an argument. You can have disagreements, you can have things that you've done wrong, or that you haven't done at all, that you forgot, like me forgetting to water the plants, and it doesn't have to become a big argument. It can just be a conversation. And sometimes with me, I think this is little bits of past, say, childhood things that come into play, but every now and then I get pulled up for something, and it's just so innocent. It's like it might be, one of them, we've got chickens here, and we made a deal that sometimes our chickens break the eggs on accident, and so then it gets egg all over the other the other eggs that haven't cracked. And I'm a little bit lazy, and so I just bring them inside, put them straight in the fridge, she'll be right. Whereas my partner said to me, he's like, "Hey, do you think we can wash these?" And I clearly forgot he said that, because I did it again. I brought a crappy egg and I put it in the fridge. And then he said to me again, he's like, "Hey babe, like we've spoken about this before. Do you think you can please just wash the eggs? Because I think it's gross having dry egg around them." And I looked at him, I was like, fair. But then there's this certain part of me that wants to get defensive, right? And it's just, I don't know, but there's no need for it. And so I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Today, I went out, I got the eggs, no joke. There was 18 eggs today. There was a lot.
Cool.
And there was egg on them. One of them had cracked. So I was like, damn it. Now I have to wash them all. So I came inside and I washed all 18 eggs. And I was so proud of myself. I was like, Jonelle, you remembered. You did it. Like, good on you. And it's great, because those first two instances, they weren't arguments. And now I have remembered the thing, and I can be proud of myself for knowing, like, cool, I did it.
Yes, indeed. Yay, Jonelle washed the eggs. Yeah.
Oh, farm life, eh?
So, on your journey to growth, how do you see yourself now versus how you saw yourself when you first started your journey?
Oh, wow. I think I used to, my perception of myself back then was that I was very determined, which I still am, but I was determined with a chip on my shoulder, and like I had something to prove to everybody else. I was trying really hard back then to get validation and to get love. I think that's something that I'd felt like I was missing in my younger years. And so everything I did in the world was to get love, to, whether that was relationships or my career, this drive was like, I loved the praise. So, whereas now I honestly feel the difference in me is that I want to focus on service, and I focus on how many people am I helping, and everything that I'm going through, everything I'm learning, I'm experiencing, straight away I'm like, well, how can I use this to help other people? I'm not and so that determination to succeed is still there, but it's not there to get love. Like, I already have that on my own. I do that for myself. And in doing that for myself, say filling up my own self-love cup and building on my own confidence, I then can have that in other relationships and other areas of life too. And that then means I've got a lot to give So whereas back in the day, it was all about status. I wanted that approval. I wanted people to love me and think I was amazing. Whereas now I'm like, I already have that. That's in me, and that's come from all this personal development work that I've done, which now means that I just get to focus on how can I help others to have that for themselves. And I think it's back then was really ego, whereas now, don't get me wrong, like I'm human, I still have an ego, of course, but it's more focused around just serving and how can I help others, which feels more gentle, it feels more authentic, it feels a lot more aligned, and it's just a way better way to live life, you know.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, what are some of the things when you were growing up,
Mm.
and what are some of the things now that would make you feel as if your parents didn't care or weren't showing you the proper attention? And then now, when you look back on that, how do you see it differently now versus how you saw it then?
Oh, I'm so sorry. The reception cut out. Are you able to ask
Okay.
that question again? I'm sorry.
Sure,
The
sure,
service
no
is
problem.
gone.
No, it's no problem. So, what are some of the things now that made you see your parents as not giving you enough attention, or that were
Mm,
making you angry? And
mm,
now, when you look back on those things, what are some of the lessons that you learned from it, or how do you see it differently?
that's such a good question. So, a lot of the things I remember when I was younger really comes down to um, their learning. You know, I guess every child or every, let's say people in their 20s, when we're thinking of the thought of becoming parents, we always think, oh, I'm going to do it so much better than my parents, or I'm going to do it so differently than how they did it. And I think that thought actually gave me this awareness of, you know what? I have this view that I'm going to parent so differently to how my parents parented me.
Mm-hmm.
But I also bet that my parents had the view that they were going to parent so differently to how their parents parented them.
Yes.
And so it's this sense of compassion that I ingrained in myself, this mantra that I think it helps anybody who's had childhood. Like I didn't have a bad childhood, right? I always had food on the table, and I know that my parents loved me for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I think it was just the way that love was shown that wasn't really a great way for me.
Okay.
And so this mantra that I learned that has really helped me, and it may help you listening at home as well, is that it's this belief that everybody is doing the best they can with what they have in that moment. And so me
Yes.
learning and ingraining this inside myself, when I reflect back on those times in my childhood where things could have been a conversation, but instead they were yelling,
Mm-hmm.
and things could have been conversed over trying to understand the situation instead of slamming doors and ignoring and not talking to each other for days on end. And when someone's in the room, you feel like you're small and you have to go and hide because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to get yelled at. And so it wasn't ever physical abuse, it was just the communication, which
Yes.
that reflecting back on that and telling myself, you know what, how that went down is that was the best that your parents knew how to be at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine what it was like for them. If that is how they treat you, or if that is how they act when they're not happy, imagine how their parents acted when they weren't happy. That would have been magnified so much more. So that's been the biggest learning and reflection for me, and that helped me to heal so much. And it's really fascinating because now when I interact with my parents, and like I say, like I've grown up a lot and I've done a lot of work, but sometimes I still see these same patterns, not argumentative at all. It's never an argument, but certain maybe like defensiveness over things, or just certain ways of acting and being, I can see, you know what, they're just doing the best they can with what they have.
Yes.
And I can put boundaries in place that mean I don't have to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And I can walk away, or I can shut the door. And that has just been the best learning of, when you're a kid, you don't have anywhere else to go. Like, they're your best example, and you learn off them, and you mirror everything that they do. And so we can tell ourselves that we're going to be different parents, or we're going to do better than what they did. But unless we actually go out of our way to learn new models and to practice new ways of being, we will end up being the same.
Yes.
It's so fascinating to me. And so that's probably been the biggest thing, is just this awareness of like, everyone in the world is doing, and you can put this in the context of your employer and your relationship, or with your parents, your family, is they're just doing the best they can with what they have in the moment.
Yes.
And then that's also gives you power to decide what you do about it. You know, am I going to stay in this, or am I going to exit? And back when I was 16, that's when I thought, I'm going to exit. I don't like this. I don't like feeling this way. I'm going to leave. I could have done it better. Okay. I didn't have to jump out of a window. I could have used my words, but I didn't have them, right? Because it wasn't modeled to me back then to have words.
It wasn't you weren't ready for that type of.
I've had to learn. I've had to learn how to use words.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So I'm gonna say something that me and my wife said to our children.
Amazing.
And I would like for you to tell me, what does that mean to you? My wife and I would say that being a parent doesn't come with a book of instructions. We learn as we go. And each child has a different personality. So we have to deal with that accordingly and grow together. What would that mean to you?
I think that's really special. And that to me comes across really explorative, really curious. And that's kind of like my life motto, rather than authoritarian and dictative of your children. And that to me sounds like you're not trying to control your kids, and you're not trying to make them fit into this mold of what you had when you grew up, and you're, you know, trying to make it all fit in, to make it make sense, and to make it be compact, you know, and uncomplicated for you. You're like, okay, cool, there's probably going to be challenges here. If we've got 3 kids, we're probably going to have, you know, the same challenges or completely different challenges, but hey, we'll work with it as we go. And there's this song that I really love by this artist Ben Platt, and it's called Grow As We Go. Right. And we're going through life and we're growing. And I think that's a beautiful motto that you are clearly showing to your children, because you having that openness. I just wish more people could say, hey, I don't know the answer, or hey, I'm probably not going to be perfect at this, I'm giving it my best shot. Like, so many children or teenagers would have a weight lifted off their shoulder, or they would feel they wouldn't have that chip anymore if their parents had just told them, hey, like, I know I wasn't perfect, but I did the best I could. Or, you know, I still love you, and I didn't necessarily show that in perfect ways, but you know, you taught me, so thank you. And you know, I just think that would be so much better than all of us, not all of us, but you know, a lot of parents thinking that they do know it all, and that their way is the best way. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me, is when people, parents or not, whether it's career, relationships, whatever, it's like, it's my way or the highway. I know best. And I'm thinking, are you kidding? The world is changing every single day. New inventions are coming out that we'd only ever dreamed of, and you think that you know the best way? Get over yourself. Come on.
Not possible. I don't care how great of a parent you have. Nobody knows it all. Nobody has the best strategy for teaching their children, because irregardless of what we know now, there's always going to be something better later.
Absolutely. And it's that theory, right? Like, the people always say that the eldest child gets it the hardest. and then the middle child, you know, gets a little bit more gentle, and then the youngest is kind of just like whatever out there doing their own thing. The parents don't even care anymore. They're just like, go, no curfew for you, don't care what you do, get out. And then you've got the oldest child that sees that and is like, are you kidding me? Like, I went through so much crap.
Right, right. If that were me, you would have. You wouldn't have let me get away with that.
I would have been grounded.
Right. Yes, that is so true. That is so true. So I must say that this has been awesome, wonderful
Thank
experience, Miss
you.
Chanel. Thank you so much. I definitely want you to send me your email so that I can check out some of your work with you.
Yeah,
Definitely want to, keep in touch.
wicked.
And please tell the audience some of your key takeaways from things that you've experienced and as well as things that you teach to other people.
That is such a big question. I think my key takeaway that I've kind of touched on a lot, and it's something that always helps me